Chapter 4. The Baroness Goblet's temperament was as inconsistent as her dress. Under the garb of jocose and good humor, which often degenerated to horseplay, she concealed a jealous and vindictive disposition, which would go any lengths when offended to revenge itself. She was wont to say she never forgot, nor forgave an injury, and that was when she had her knife, as she termed it, in a man. She knew how to bide her time, but that was when the time came, she turned it. But when the time came, she turned it. These bloodthirsty sentiments, coupled with an assertion which was constantly on her lips, that when she willed the death of anyone, he died, and that she had powers at her command of which no one was aware but herself, frightened many timid and ignorant people into trying to propitiate so apparently potent a mortal, and generally kowtowing before her. To such votaries, so long as they pleased her, Madame Goblet was used to show her favor by various gifts of dress, jewelry, or money, according to their circumstances, for in some cases she was lavishly generous, but she soon tired of her acquaintances, and replaced them by fresh favorites. The hints she gave forth regarding herself and her antecedents were too extraordinary to gain credence except from the most ignorant of her auditors, but the Baroness always spoke in parables and left no proof of what she meant to be brought up against her. This proved that if she were clever, she was still more cunning. The hints she occasionally gave of being descended from royal blood, though on the wrong side of the blanket, and of the connection being acknowledged privately, if not publicly, by the existing members of the reigning family, received with open mouths by people of her own class, but rejected with scorn by such as were acquainted with those whom she affected to know. It was remarkable also, and only another proof that, whatever her real birth and antecedents, the Baroness Goblet was unique, that, notwithstanding her desire to be considered noble by birth, if not by law, she never shirked the fact that the Baron was in trade. On the contrary, she rather made a boast of it, and used to relate stories bringing it into ridicule with the greatest gusto. The fact being that Baron Goblet was the head of a large firm of export bootmakers trading in London under the name of Fantasy S.A., the boots and shoes of which, though professedly French, were all manufactured in Germany, where the firm maintained an enormous factory. The Baroness could seldom be in the company of anyone for more than 5 minutes without asking them where they bought their boots and shoes, and recommending them to the Fantasy S.C. as the best makers in London. She wanted to be first in everything, in popularity, in notice, and in conversation. If she could not attract attention by her personality, she startled people by her vulgarity. If she could not reign supreme by reason of her supposed birth, she would do so by boots and shoes, if nothing else. And if anybody slighted her or appeared to discredit her statements, he or she was immediately marked down for retaliation. Harriet Brant had not been many days in Heist before the Baroness had become jealous of the attention which she paid Mrs. Pullen and her child. She saw that the girl was attractive, she heard that she was rich, and she liked to have pretty and pleasant young people about her when at home. They drew men to the house and reflected a sort of credit upon herself, and she determined to get Harriet away from Margaret Pullen and chain her to her own side instead. The Baroness hated Miss Layton quite as much as Eleanor hated her. She was quick of hearing and very intuitive. She had caught more than one of the young lady's uncomplimentary remarks upon herself, and had divined still more than she had heard. She had observed her sympathy with Bobby also, and that she encouraged him in his boyish rebellion. For all these reasons, she had her knife into Miss Layton, and was waiting her opportunity to turn it. And she foresaw, with the assistance perhaps of the powers of darkness, of whose acquaintance she was so proud, that she would be enabled to take her revenge on Eleanor Layton through Harriet Brant. But her first advances to the latter were suavity itself. She was not going to frighten the girl by showing her claws until she had stroked her down the right way with her pâtés de velours. She came upon her one morning as she sat upon the sands, with little Ethel in her arms. The nurse was within speaking distance, busy with her needlework, and the infant seemed so quiet with Miss Brant that she took such evident pleasure in nursing it that Miss Pullen no longer minded leaving them together, and had gone for a stroll with Miss Layton among the Dagu. So the Baroness found Harriet, comparatively speaking, alone. "So you're playing nursemaid again," she commenced in her abrupt manner. "You seem to have taken a wonderful fancy to that child." "She is such a good little creature," replied Harriet. "She has no trouble whatever. She sleeps half the day." Miss Brant had a large box of chocolates beside her, into which she continually dipped her hand. Her mouth, too, was stained with a delicate sweetmeat. She was always eating, either fruit or bonbons. She handed the box now, with a timid air, to the Baroness. "Do you care for chocolate, madame?" she asked. The Baroness did not like being called madame, according to the French fashion. She thought it derogated from her dignity. She wished everyone to address her as my lady, and considered she was cheated out of her rights when it was omitted. But she liked chocolate almost as well as Harriet did. "Thank you, I'll have a few," she said, grabbing about a dozen in her huge hand at the first venture. "What a liking for candy these Americans seem to have introduced into England. I can remember the time when you never saw such a thing as sweets in the palace. I don't think they were allowed, and now they're all over the place. I shouldn't wonder if Her Majesty hasn't a box or two in her private apartments. And as for the princesses, well—" "The palace! Her Majesty!" echoed Miss Brant, opening her dark eyes very wide. "As I tell 'em," continued the Baroness, "they won't have a tooth left amongst the lot of 'em soon. What are you staring at?" But, do you go to the Queen's palace?" demanded Harriet, incredulously, as well she might. "Not unless I'm sent for, you may take your oath. I ain't fond enough of them for all that. Besides, Windsor's horribly damp and don't suit me at all. But you mustn't go and repeat what I tell you in the hotel. It might give offence in high places if I were to known to talk of it. You see, there's some of 'em that never seen me since I married the Baron. Being in trade, they thought he wasn't good enough for me. I've heard that when Lady Morton, the Dowager Countess, you know, was asked if she had seen me lately, she called out loud enough for the whole room to hear, 'Do you mean that woman that married the bootman? No, I haven't seen her. I don't mean to either. Ha, ha, ha! But I can afford to laugh at all that, my dear.'" "But I don't quite understand," said Harriet Brant, with a bewildered look. "Why, the Baron deals in shoe leather. Haven't you heard it? I suppose we've got the largest manufactory in Germany. Covers 4 acres of ground. I'll give you my word." "Shoe leather!" again ejaculated Harriet Brant, not knowing what to say. "Why, yes! Of course all the aristocracy go in for trade nowadays. It's the fashion. There's the Viscountess Gormsby keeps a bonnet shop, and Lord Charles Snow as a bakery, and Lady Erison as a curiosity shop, and stands about it, dusting tables and chairs all day. But how can you know anything about it? Just coming from the West Indies, and all those horrid blacks. Ain't you glad to find yourself amongst Christians again?" "This is the first time I ever left Jamaica," said Miss Brant. "I was born there." "But you won't die there, or I'm much mistaken. You're too good to be wasted on Jamaica. Where are you going back to England? When are you going back to England?" "Oh, I don't know. I've hardly thought about it yet. Not while Miss Pullen stays here, though." "Why, you're not tied to her apron string, surely? What's she to you?" "She is very kind, and I have no friends," replied Miss Brant. The Baroness burst into a coarse laugh. "You won't want for friends once you show your face in England, I can tell you. I'd like to have you at our house. The Red House, we call it, Princess. We call it Princess, but there, I mustn't tell you her name or I'll go through the hotel. And she says things to me that she means to go further. But she said the other day that she preferred the Red House to Windsor. And for comfort and cheerfulness, so she may." "I suppose it is very beautiful, then," observed Harriet. "You must judge for yourself," replied the Baroness, with a broad smile. "When you come to London, you'll be your own mistress there, I suppose, not so tied as you are here. I call it a shame to keep you dancing at attendance on that brat, when there's a nurse whose business it is to look after her." "Oh, but indeed it is my own wish," said the girl, as she cuddled the sleeping baby to her bosom, and laid her lips in a long kiss upon its little mouth. "I asked leave to nurse her. She loves me, and even nurse cannot get her off to sleep as I can. And it is so beautiful to have something to love you, Madame Gobley. In the convent, I felt so cold, so lonely. If ever I took a liking to a girl, we were placed in separate rooms. It is what I have longed for, to come out into the world and find someone to be a friend and to love me, only me, and all for myself. Madame Gobley laughed again. Well, you've only got to show those eyes of yours to get plenty of people to love you, and to let you love them in return. That is, if the men count in your estimation of what's beautiful. Harriet raised her eyes and looked at the woman who addressed her. There was the innocence of ignorance in them as yet, but the slumbering fire in her depths proved of what her nature would be capable when it was given the opportunity to show itself. Hers was a passionate temperament, yearning to express itself, panting for the love which it had never known, and ready to burst forth like a tree into blossom directly the sun of desires and reciprocity shone upon it. The elder woman, who had not been without her little experience in her day, recognized the feeling at once, and thought that she would not give a fig for the virtue of any man who was subject to its influences. I don't think that you'll confine your attentions to babies long, quoth the Baroness, as she encountered that glance. How do you know? said her young companion. Ah, it's enough that I do know, my dear. I have my ways and means of knowing things that I keep to myself. I have friends about me, too, who can tell me everything, who can't help me if I choose to give life and fortune to one person, and trouble and death to another, and woe to them that offend me. That's all. But if the Baroness expected to impress Miss Brant with her hints of terror, she was mistaken. Harriet did not seem in the least astonished. She had been brought up by old Pete and the servants of her father's plantation to believe in witches, and the evil eye, and Obadiah, and the whole cult of devil worship. I know all about that, she remarked presently, but you can't do me either good or harm. I want nothing from you, and I never shall. Don't be too sure of that, replied Madame Gobley, nodding her head. I've brought young women more luck than enough with their lovers before now, yes, and married women into the bargain. And if it hadn't been for me, lady, it nearly sleeped out, didn't it? But there's a certain countess who would never have been a widow and married for a second time to a man of her art, if I hadn't helped her, and she knows it too. By the way, how do you like Miss Layton? Not at all, replied Harriet quickly. She is not a bit like Miss Pullen, so cold and stiff and disagreeable. She hardly ever speaks to me. Is it true that she is the daughter of a lord, as Madame Leblanc says? And is it that makes her so proud? She's the daughter of Lord Walthamstow, but that's nothing. They've got no money. People live down in the country, quite in a beggarly manner. A gal with a fortune of her own would rank heads and heads above her in society. There's not much thought of besides money nowadays, I can tell you. Why does she stay with Miss Pullen, then? And are they any relation to each other? Demanded Harriet. Relation? No. I expect she's just brought her out of the charity because she couldn't afford to go to the seaside by herself. She was about to announce the projected relation between the two ladies when a sudden thought struck her. Captain Ralph Pullen was expected to arrive in Heist in a few days, thus much as she had ascertained through the landlady of the Lion d'Or. She knew by repute that he was considered to be one of the handsomest and most conceited men in the Limerick Rangers, a corps which was noted for its good-looking officers. It might be better for the furtherance of her plans against the peace of Miss Layton's mind, she thought, to keep her engagement to Captain Pullen a secret. At all events, no one could say it was her business to make it public. She looked in Harriet Brant's yearning, passionate eyes, and decided that it would be strange if any impressionable young man could be thrown within their influence without having his fidelity a little shaken, especially if affianced to such a cold and uninteresting bit of goods as Eleanor Layton. Like the parrot in the story, though she said nothing, she thought a good deal and inwardly rumbled with half-suppressed laughter as she pictured the discomfort of the latter young lady if by any chance she should find her fiancé's attention transferred from herself to the little West Indian. You seem amused, madame, said Harriet presently. I I was thinking of you and all the young men who are doomed to be slaughtered by those eyes of yours, said the Baroness. You'll make mischief enough amongst my friends, I'll bet, if I had you at the Red House. Harriet felt flattered and consciously pleased. She had never received a compliment in the convent. No one had ever hinted that she was pretty, and she had had no opportunity of hearing it since. Do you think I'm handsome, then? She inquired, with a heightened color. I think you're a deal worse. I think you're dangerous, replied her new friend, and I wouldn't trust you with a baron any further than I could see you. Oh, how can you say so? Exclaimed the girl, though she was pleased all the same to hear it said. I wouldn't, and that's the truth. Gustav's an awful fellow after the gals, and I have to keep a tight hold of him, I can tell you, and the more you keep out of his way, the better I shall be pleased. You'll make a grand match some day, if you're only sharp and keep your eyes open. What do you call a grand match? Asked Harriet, as she let the nurse take the sleeping child from her arms without remonstrance. Why, a lord or an honourable at the very least, since you have money of your own. It's money they're all after these times, you know. Why, we have dukes and marquises marrying all sorts of gals from America, gals whose fathers made their money in oil or medicine or electricity or any other dodge, so long as they made it. And why should you do the same as American gals? You have money, I know, and a goodish lot, I fancy, added the Baroness, with her cunning eyes fixed upon the girl as if to read her thoughts. Oh, yes, replied Harriet. Miss Trawler, my trustee, says it was too much for a young woman to have under her own control. But I don't know anything about the value of money, never have had to spend it before. I am to have £1,500 every year. Is that a good deal? Quite enough to settle you in life, my dear, exclaimed the Baroness, who immediately thought what a good thing it would be if Miss Brant could be persuaded to sink her capital into the boot trade. And all under your own control, too. You're a lucky young woman. I know a half-dozen lords, not to say princes, who would jump at you. Princes? Cried Harriet, unable to believe her ears. Certainly, not English ones, of course, but German, which are quite as good after all, for a prince is a prince any day. There's Prince Alberdath of Wascomere, and Prince Erald of Muddlesheen, and Prince Loris of the Taxalmine, and ever so many more, that they're in and out of the Red House 20 times a day. But don't you be in a hurry. Don't take that first offer, Miss Brant. Pick and choose. Flirt with whom you like, and have your fun, but wait and look about you a bit before you decide.